Are you ready for rapid fire?
Pew, 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 pew. Let's do it.
It has come to it. All right. So, America's troll, Colin Cowherd, says history be damned. USC should not play Notre Dame any longer because the Trojan schedule is going to be too tough now that they're going to the Big Ten, and keeping Notre Dame serves no purpose for USC. He says the Trojans play their rival, UCLA, every year, and they don't need Notre Dame anymore. So, do you buy or sell this, Jesse?
I would have to say we sell this. And I think it's really funny. To me, like the thing I like honed in on the most from this statement is basically Colin Cowherd was saying USC played a pretty average schedule, but because they had Notre Dame, it made it a legit or strong schedule, right? And so that's the first thing that I would like to address.
Which you wouldn't have said 15 years ago.
There's no way that would have been uttered 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is what makes our schedule good, tough, go on down the line with whatever word you want to fill in there. So I think that is first and foremost. And then second, it's just like, it doesn't really matter anymore because everyone is going to be playing tough schedules, right? And so there's no reason to remove your long-standing rival. I would argue that Notre Dame is a bigger rival than UCLA because of Notre Dame's prominence and Notre Dame's, they're actually good at football, right? And so I think that has to serve into the rivalry as well when you're talking about USC and UCLA. So for those kind of reasons,
it's also more rare. Like you see them, like USC and UCLA play each other in everything every year, but it's still rare when Notre Dame comes to town, to the Coliseum.
Right. And so that's, it's just, there's so much that comes of that game outside of, is it a tough opponent? Is there this or that? It's just, Notre Dame, it's just like when USC comes to Indiana, right? Like it serves both teams, I guess is what I'm saying. So I just, Colin Cowherd loves to get up there every few weeks, not even every few weeks. It seems like every day, and just say something that he knows is just going to run with the rest of the media. But I genuinely think he believes this one. I do wonder. And if you're a fan of USC, why would you want to, again, remove such a tradition like that, right? Like, don't you look forward to the Notre Dame and USC game every year? Like, isn't it a fun rivalry where you're anticipating one team or both teams are going to be really good and it has implications on the rest of the season, right? Like, you shouldn't want to play crappy opponents. You should want to play good opponents because that is what's making you better. That is what's going to help you in the long run of your season.
Right. Coach Bent 574 says he got in here at the start of the show and he says a certain local sports talk radio guy kind of agreed with Cowherd and was asking if we are in or we out on that. Gee, I can only wonder who that local sports talk radio guy might be. Oh, well, I guess I'll have to go to my grave not knowing. But, so the conversation started, the video that I saw from his show, with Cowherd was talking about Lincoln Riley has been wanting out of the LSU series. And so Cowherd took it straight to, well, why get rid of LSU? Get rid of USC, And as I've always said, for one, Cowherd's a clown. He's a troll. He's a clickbait artist. He doesn't believe half the stuff that he's saying. Whether or not he actually believes this, like you say, Jess, I don't know. He was dismissing Notre Dame as a rival of USC, though, which
is insane.
But yeah, based on the fact, well, they've got UCLA. That's their rival. Well, no.
There's literally a trophy.
Yes. Yes. There literally is a trophy. And there literally is, like ask Keyshawn Johnson what he thinks of Notre Dame.
That's what I mean.
That'll tell you where the rivalry is.
Ask Pete Carroll.
Johnson all these years later. Who?
Ask Pete Carroll. Ask Matt Leinart. Ask Reggie
anybody.
Bush.
Ask anyone who's played in this thing that goes back to 1926. If Notre Dame and USC are rivals. And, I debated whether or not I was even going to talk about this. Brian obviously talked about it on his show. The conversation's out there now. And, it is I think it's at least worth talking about. But the bottom line in this whole thing is sex sells, right? And Notre Dame is sexy. And they sell tickets, and they also bring big numbers on TV. And you talked about like if you're a USC fan and a USC administrator, anyone associated with USC, when Notre Dame comes to the Coliseum, those are some of the biggest crowds that USC has at any, at any time. Go back and look historically at the kind of crowds that Notre Dame USC has brought to the Coliseum. And obviously it sells out anytime USC comes to Notre Dame. These schools and programs separated by thousands of miles, it obviously goes back to Newt Rockne. That's where it began. And, I get it. Like a lot of these rivalries are going by the wayside with all this different conference realignment. But the Irish and the Trojans have been playing since 1926. The only two times they've taken a break, World War II and the pandemic a few years ago. That's it. But this is a series that matters to both sides. It's a great rivalry. Both stadiums, again, they're always packed when they play, and it rates higher than USC, UCLA. It's going to rate higher on TV than any other game that USC plays this season. That's just the way it is. USC joined the Big Ten for what? For money, right? Because of the big, all that Big Ten revenue that they're going to get. And in today's big-time college athletics, money has always mattered, but it means even more now. Like when you got revenue sharing coming, everyone needs every penny that they can collect. And Notre Dame USC sells. It sells big. It's going to rate higher and sell more tickets than anything else that USC has got. So you can argue about, does it make sense from a competitive standpoint and all that different stuff? It makes sense from the bottom line. And I think that's why USC has no desire to see this thing go away. Like, will they still feel like that 5-10 years from now? That is a question that is probably going to have to be addressed as they get into this new world of the Big Ten or whatever comes next after that. But it's obviously ludicrous to think that USC would just want to dump Notre Dame because
for an opponent that you've played 100 years basically is for Colin Cowherd to go up there and say they don't matter, they don't need them on the schedule anymore after literally playing for 100 years, right? Like it's ludicrous to even think about, in my opinion.
Right. D-Rock Irish obviously getting in here late today. He's citing Irish Tribune that Jabron Payne has undergone ACL reconstruction and will miss the entire season. He's not expected to miss the entire season. He's going to miss the entire season. Notre Dame announced it just before our show started today, and we covered it at the start of the show. But that's been well over an hour ago at this point. So we might just want to any thoughts for people who might be with us now who weren't with us at the start of the show, Jess, on Jabron Payne missing the season after having ACL surgery? Did you hear me?
Sorry, I didn't know if you posed a question there.
Any thoughts?
Oh, yeah.
Jabron Payne.
Yeah, like we talked about a little bit earlier. I just want to see if this has a ripple effect on the rest of the running back room, right? A ripple effect of how does it affect Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price? And then the ripple effect of can a freshman step up and kind of fill the role that Jabron Payne was taking on at the kind of like that third string running back flex guy who comes in on short down type situation. So yeah, I'm most curious to see kind of how it affects everyone else around him, because I think now you have the opportunity for some freshmen to step up. And I think you have the opportunity for maybe this affects, like I talked about earlier, Jeremiah Love. How does this affect his usage? Are they more cautious with him and trying to keep him injury free?
Yeah, all those things, and again, I know some people kind of getting in late, but it obviously stinks for Jabron Payne, and it affects the depth chart to the extent of kind of what you were talking about. You're still going to have Jeremiah Love at the top, Jadarian Price. Those two guys 1-2. The question is going to be, can Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young, can one of them, kind of take over that that goal line / short yardage type role that Jabron Payne had. I'm sure D'Lo McCullough has a lot of confidence in them. We talked about whether or not maybe Devin Ford comes back to the running back room. I don't think that they need to move Devin Ford back immediately. I think it is more an emergency type situation. If something were to happen to one of the other backs, then you've got a back with some experience. You could slide back over from the secondary, and give you some experience over there. But I think that they'll be fine, and hopefully Jabron Payne is able to recover, and maybe we see him again, next spring. That's probably it is. I'm sure the earliest that we're going to see Jabron Payne at this point recovering from an ACL would be next spring, if we even see him in the spring. It's hard to say exactly when that can happen. Andre with a follow-up to the Notre Dame USC, Notre Dame Southern Cal, one of the best rivalries in college football. So not really a question. I mean, I think I've got to agree with that. I think Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, Texas, Oklahoma. Texas, Oklahoma is even bigger than Texas A&M at this point. Any other rivalries that you would put in that conversation up there with Notre Dame, USC, and the ones that I just listed?
I think you hit all the important ones. I mean, it's definitely, when we're talking about some of the greatest rivalries in college football history, it is up there.
I agree. Again, I think Andre said, Brian talked about the whole Cowherd thing for like an hour and a half. That is way more time than I'm going to give, that buffoon, because that's what it is. It's just buffoonery. Again, could something happen to this rivalry in the future? Sure, because nothing is safe right now. That's just the way it is. None of us would have seen USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten, leaving the Pac-12 and going to the Big Ten. No, none of us would have seen the Pac-12 just completely imploding the way it did. But it all happened. So never say never, I guess. But RJ Abatia, who covers USC and who's been on this show in the past, is going to be with us next week. So we will have a USC guy on next week to talk a little bit about this, kind of gauge what he thinks. Because remember, we're looking at this from the Notre Dame side. So, of course, from the Notre Dame side, it makes complete sense that they continue to play. But we'll kind of get RJ's perspective from the USC side and see if there could be any, kind of fissures. Maybe it goes away anytime in the near future. Hopefully not. So an interesting question that was the last question posted in the We In, We Out thread. And this is from Peruvian Irish. With Louisville games streaming only on Peacock this year, it seems the move to streaming only games marches on. In the next 5 years, Notre Dame will have a high cost, $15 or more streaming option to view all home games, either through Peacock or a Notre Dame specific app. We in or we out on that. And he says, of course, note, this doesn't include away games. What do you think about that? Well, Notre Dame / Peacock have their own streaming option to view all home games, a premium, high-cost streaming option.
I'm just going to say we out, and I'm just saying we out because I think that Peacock would have to offer more of a package than just that, and I think that's ultimately kind of what NBC is for. So for that reason, I'm just going to say we out.
Yeah, and the fact that NBC just, is paying Notre Dame $50 million a year,
Right.
for the rights package, I have to be out on that as well. I don't think that it's going to go all streaming by any means. Could you see the price of the streaming go up, especially when it's a Notre Dame streaming day, that kind of thing? Sure, but I don't think that they go quite this far with what they're going to do with the streaming package. Notre Dame and Navy, they announced today, that was, the big news of the day until the Jabron Payne news, unfortunately, came out. They're going to kick off at noon, October 26th on either ABC or ESPN. So now we are waiting for the USC game time to be announced. And there is one other road game that it's not hitting me off the top of my head that we are waiting for right now. Let me see if I can find it. What do you think about the noon kickoff first for Notre Dame Navy?
Hate noon kickoff. I hate big noon football. It's just too early in the day for me, right? And so I'm just gonna, like, if this were a we in, we out, I would have to say we out, because I like my Notre Dame sandwiched right in the middle. I like to get a little appetizer, game in, and then Notre Dame can be my main course, and then I get a little dessert football afterwards in the evening time. So, when you start those games early in the day, it's like, okay, you end by 3, 4 o'clock. You're like, what am I supposed to do with the rest of my day? So I don't know. I'm personally not a fan of earlier games.
I like the Navy game starting at noon. I like it. So I'm definitely in on this one. I like it. And the Navy game goes fast. And, from a perspective of I've got work to do after the game, I like the fact that I'm going to be done by around 5 or 6 o'clock at night and not be going later than that. So completely selfishly, I go in on this one. There's no doubt about that. So we talked the other day about whether or not this is a make or break season for Marcus Freeman. And Kenny posted on the Champions Lounge thread that we have up. Here's what he said. Shouldn't Notre Dame fans expect to qualify for the now expanded playoffs every year? Someone responded, objectively, I think that's too optimistic because I expect the new college football playoff landscape or the new football landscape to produce more parity at the top level and be way more like the NFL. So, Jesse, where do you stand? Should the expectation for Notre Dame be in the playoff every year, or is that too pie in the sky to expect that?
I think it's too much to expect to make it every single year, but I don't think it's too much to expect to be on the footstep or the doorstep every single year, right? Like be a team that's like a first, if they don't make it, they're a first team out, right? Like it's because they went 9-3 or maybe 10-2 wasn't quite enough to get them in. But to make it every single season, I don't think that should be the expectation. I think that you should have the expectation that there is a shot to be in every single season. And whether you're, again, one of those first teams in, first team out, I think that's a different story. But to make it every single year, I would have to say out. Or I think that's a little too lofty of expectations.
I think that being in the playoff should be is it the goal every year? Like for starters?
Yeah, that's definitely the goal for sure. But to expect to make it every year, I think is a different situation. Like you're playing to make it every year. And if you fall a game short, okay, I can live with that, right? And so, like, that's where I'm saying is, like, I'm not going to be upset if Notre Dame doesn't make the playoff every single year.
Okay.
As long as they are competing and right there every year.
Yeah.
Is kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, I think that because it's an expanded playoff of 12 teams, and even though they haven't approved the 14 team yet, very good likelihood that in a couple of years it's going to go to 14. With that many teams, all you're doing is asking Notre Dame to be around the top 14 teams in the nation. So essentially, can you go 11-1, 10-2 every year? I think that's a completely realistic expectation. So, I agree with what you're saying. The world's not going to end if they miss the playoff, but at the same time, because it is an expanded playoff and you're going to have so many teams in there, a lot of people are going to be upset if they're not in the playoff, and they're going to be really upset if they end up with an 8-4 type record. But I do think that the basic expectations should be being in the playoff year in and year out, especially again with the reconditioning that Marcus Freeman has done to the program and to recruiting and everything else. I'm going in on this. I do think that they should expect to be in the playoff every year. I think that should be the basic expectation. But again, world doesn't end if you're not, as long as you're knocking on the door. Maybe once every 3 or 4 years, you end up on the outside looking in. You're in that 15 to 20 range or whatever, but I think very realistic to expect to be in there every year. We got a lot of different stuff that we're hitting here today. I'm curious to see what you say about this one. I saw this question in a Stuart Mandel college football mailbag on the Athletic this week. Over the next decade, what's one team you're buying stock in, one team you're selling, and one team you're holding?
So one team I'm buying stock in is actually Kansas.
Ooh, interesting.
I'm holding stock on LSU, and I'm selling stock on Michigan. Boom, 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 boom.
All right. We're in the same ballpark. I'm buying stock on Notre Dame, because again, of everything that Marcus Freeman is doing, I'm going to completely buy on that. I had a tough time. Michigan and Penn State were my sell stocks.
Yeah, you can't sell Penn State because they do the same thing every year. So what's there to sell on?
Well, there are a lot of people saying that with this expanded playoff, Penn State's in a great situation because now, even though they're finishing third in the Big Ten, that they're going to get in. I'm going to sell on Michigan. I agree. I'm more sell on Michigan, and my hold is on Texas. Texas showed
I
us
like the Texas hold.
Yeah, Texas showed us they were back last year. That's like I want to see what happens, especially with them going to the SEC now. So I'm holding on Texas.
I think DK has a good one. I think you can start selling Washington. I think it's going to be a rough transition for them.
Yeah, that's a good one.
They've really maximized, and I think now you're going to see Oregon kind of really start to dominate more of that area again. Honestly, you know what I mean? It's just like you're not going to continuously hit on really good coaches at Washington, and now they're moving over. They're leaving the Pac-12, and I just think Washington's going to have a hard time.
Yep, that's a really good one. I like that. TD4ND, Texas Hold'em. That is why I didn't even think about that when I said it. So, just the score bug on the TV screen has become a fixture in TV sports broadcasts. There was a time, until around, the mid 90s, which, when you were born, that score bug on the TV screen didn't exist. So my question to you, you've grown up with the score on the screen. Would you want to watch a game without the score and the time and all that stuff up there on the TV screen?
No, I wouldn't, because first and foremost, when I'm watching games, especially college and NFL games, I'm switching back and forth, right? Like I'm going back and forth. And I've told you this before. I'm a notorious muter. So if I got a game muted, I'm flipping back and forth. I got no score bug. I'm gonna have no clue what's going on, right? And so that's the number one thing is I flip between games so much checking in that half the time I just want to see the score and where it's at, and then I can move on, right? And so that's part of it for me. A second part is I just really don't trust the game analysts to give you a full kind of, if there's no score bug on there, I don't think they do a good enough job of continuously kind of updating you throughout the game. You know what I mean? And I just think that's where that it just naturally with the score bug where it has shifted to. So now you take it away. The last thing I want is if I'm running late or tuning in, maybe midway through the game and I turn it on and for 10, 15 minutes, I can't even get a score or where they're at in the game. Right. And so I think that's kind of what would play into it for me as well.
Yeah, it is. Fox was the first network to do it. Fox got the NFL in 1993. They took it away from CBS, and then CBS ultimately came back a few years later when they took the AFC package away from NBC. But they called it the Fox Box because it was like this big novel thing. And there were people who complained about having the Fox Box on your TV screen because nobody was used to it. And it was like taking up all this space. And it's like, okay, now you got the score and you got the obviously the time, the running clock, and the whole thing. It is completely unnerving, though. There, like from time to time when they'll show an old game either on the NFL Network, or I don't even know if they have ESPN Classic anymore. I don't know if they still have that. But when they used to show, like the old basketball games and stuff like that on ESPN Classic, it is completely unnerving to watch some of those games, and you don't have the score up on the screen, and you're sitting there watching, and sometimes the announcers give them, there was one particular one I was watching. It was actually Cowboys 49ers, the NFC Championship game, the catch, Joe Montana to Dwight Clark and all that kind of stuff that sent the 49ers to Super Bowl 16. I was watching that last year on NFL Network, and they never gave the score. And it's like, it is completely unnerving. I think we're just at a point now where you can't do without it. We're also used to having that there. And like you said, I'm a notorious flipper, just like you. I want to see the score. I want to know everything that I can. As soon as I, like if you turn on the game late, I want to know what's going on in the game. So maybe it's a crutch now, but I don't think we can live without it at this point.
Well, to me, like I could get by in football or baseball, right? Because if I'm watching that game from the beginning, fine. But like, I can keep track. Okay, they got a touchdown here, they got a run here. There's not a chance I could do it in basketball to keep a running tally the entire time. You know what I mean? Like that would just be so hard. And so, yeah, there's no way. There's no way I could do it.
Nope, not at all. Good point by Michael. Penn State no longer the automatic third team in the Big Ten. In the new era, they're in trouble without a scoring offense. I mean, when you're bringing in these teams, USC, I don't know about UCLA.
I think that's a fun question.
Washington.
Who's more in trouble? The Pac-12 teams coming over or Penn State?
That is a good one. I think Penn State.
I think Penn State.
Absolutely.
James Franklin's a fraud.
You and Vince share that philosophy.
I could do James Franklin's job. To never come close. You know what I mean? It's like
Brent
doesn't even come close. He doesn't even come close. That's the issue. Is like everyone's just like okay with being like, all right, Ohio State, Michigan losses this year. Okay. It's like, come on, those are your biggest games, and it's okay that he loses those. And it's the same thing every year. Good to a great defense, good offensive line and run game, horrible quarterbacks that don't add any contribution to the offense.
Right. You nailed it. And that's why I think that they're more in trouble than especially Oregon and USC. I mean, USC's got a lot to prove in terms of what they're going to be defensively, but from an offensive standpoint, obviously they have everything that Penn State does not. So I think Penn State is in much more trouble than either one of those two teams. Aaron Donald retired at the age of 33 this offseason. ESPN's Michael Wilbon says he thinks Donald's going to play for someone this upcoming season. Scale of 1 to 10, what chance do you give that to happen?
0 out of 10. Not a single chance. He wanted to retire after the Super Bowl, but he got talked into a few more seasons. He's done everything that he needs to do. He's Defensive Player of the Year. He's All-Pro. He's a Super Bowl champ. There's nothing on his bucket list or list of accomplishments that he hasn't done in college or the NFL. And so there's no shame of just going out on top, right? Like he's got nothing else to do. And so when you're 33, you've got everything done. You're still young. You got no CTE. You got money.
Right.
You got, you don't have any serious long-term injuries.
You're like, going to the Hall of Fame.
You got children. You know what I mean? Like, why would you do that to yourself of potentially risking, like a Ryan Shazier moment where you know what I mean? Like a freak accident where something happens. I'm all about riding out on top. And I think that's what, not to get in a tangent here, but I think that's what the Cubs are going to do this weekend with Kyle Hendricks to hit his 10-year mark. I think they're going to allow him to start a game this weekend. They're going to pull him and they're going to give him the Kerry Wood treatment and allow the fans to give him a standing ovation. And that's simply what Aaron Donald did. He got out when it was time. And like I just said, he wanted to be done after the Super Bowl, but Sean McVay convinced him to stick around a little bit longer.
Right. Exactly. And that team is far worse now than it was at that point. And just like you said, he's done everything that there is to do. He's got his Super Bowl. He's done all this stuff. He's going to the Hall of Fame. He's only 33. He can still walk. He's never had any serious injuries. It's pretty similar to Barry Sanders, a guy going out on top. A lot of people thought that they were going to be able to, like Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson, both. I think a lot of people thought that those guys were going to come out of retirement. They never did. Marvin Hagler, just like him, when he walked away after the Sugar Ray Leonard fight, he was still relative, he was getting older, but he was still in his 30s, but he never came back. Some guys are just done with it. And I think everything points to Aaron Donald was done with it. So I'll give it a 1 just on the outside chance, but I don't think he's coming back either. I think it's off into the sunset, but he's going to be a very popular guy in mid-October. I think a lot.
I give him a better chance of being a defensive line coach this season than I do him actually playing.
Wow, you think he'd coach that soon, huh?
I'm just saying, if you had to pick one or the other of what I think would be more likely, even if they're both extremely unlikely, I'm going with I think he would coach over playing.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that after Caitlin Clark drew a technical foul the other night in the Fever's loss to the LA Sparks, Indiana head coach Christie Sides said she wants Clark to talk less to officials, and she wants her and the rest of the team to focus more on mid-range shots.
It is hater energy, and I'll say that again. It is a hater energy. I don't even understand why this lady is the head coach.
I don't either.
Of the Indiana Fever, or why she signed off on them taking Caitlin Clark. Maybe she didn't even have a choice, because it seems like ever since Caitlin Clark has come into the league, all she has done is criticize Caitlin Clark rather than be like, oh, this is a
and
rookie.
Criticize her publicly.
That's what
well.
I mean. Like, publicly. This is the face of the league right now, and she is still a rookie. Like, rookies are allowed to make mistakes. They're not expected to be bona fide professional studs as soon as they walk into the league, right? And so it's just
she dropped 30 points and she's talking about, well, she needs a better mid-range shot.
That's what it seems like every time I turn around, this coach has something else to say about Caitlin Clark, and it's like, this is Caitlin Clark. This is a once in a lifetime player. We've never seen someone like this before. And so just the amount of non-grace that she's giving her number 1 draft pick is just astonishing to me.
Stop trying to change Caitlin Clark. It's as simple as that. You drafted her for a reason. You're a horrible franchise. You had the number 1 pick in the draft 2 years in a row. Caitlin Clark is one of the best players to ever play women's college basketball. Has there been a learning curve? Of course, because she's played some playoff caliber teams, and it's professional basketball now, so there's been a little bit of a learning curve, but don't try to tame the stallion. Let the stallion run. That's what Lisa Bluter did at Iowa. And Lisa Bluter also didn't criticize the stallion in public. Like the whole, like you hear it, criticize in private, praise in public. And that's all that Christie Sides should be doing, is talking up Caitlin Clark as much as possible whenever there's a mic and a camera in front of her. If she wants to have closed door conversations about she thinks her mid-range game or whatever needs some work, okay, whatever. But, she pulled the same thing in that game as well, where she sat her for like 5.5 minutes when they've got the lead. Second time she's done this, sitting her for extended time in the second half, and they end up blowing the lead and losing the game. And it's a completely winnable game, because their only win of the season so far was against the same team in LA just a few days before. And
Caitlin Clark is is number 13 in leading scorers in all of the WNBA right now as a rookie. It's just the only thing I would criticize her game is the turnovers, but that's natural. Again,
it's going to happen. Yeah, when you're a rookie.
But it's just, I don't understand why.
Brando says they don't draft her to shoot mid-range shots.
Exactly,
and that's exactly right. I mean, did you watch any film on Caitlin Clark before she came to Indiana?
Ask the Warriors if they're mad about Steph Curry pulling up from 3.
Right. Steph Curry changed the game. And I'm not saying Caitlin Clark is going to change the women's game in year one, even though, she's brought about a lot of change already, just like the charter flights and everything else. Play to her strengths. Don't try to change her and make her fit into some box. Remember, this is a first-year head coach herself, and I'm amazed that the Fever, even went this route, knowing they were going to draft Caitlin Clark at number 1. But it's just amazing with every step Christie Sides takes. She just keeps doing sillier and dumber things, trying to change Caitlin Clark. I'm not saying that you can't coach Caitlin Clark, but you need to change your approach.
Do it behind closed doors.
Yes, exactly.
There is no place for any sort of negativity publicly around your star player. There's just not.
Right. You don't see NBA coaches making these kind of comments about NBA players in postgame press.
The best example I got is the entire world knew Zion Williamson needed to lose weight. How many times did a coach come out after a game and say, Zion probably would have played better if he was 20 pounds lighter, right?
Right. And that's the kind of stuff that this coach would be saying if, if he was coaching him. Yes.
So it's just dumb.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. DK probably is a little bit burnout.
Yeah, it's so hard. They roll the college women's season right into the start of the WNBA season. So it's like there's got to be some sort of grace for that transition. And especially being the number 1 pick in Caitlin Clark, there's just so much buzz and media around her. Just like I completely agree. There's got to be a
lot of mental, that she goes through with all that attention.
Right.
That does add up over time. The cume effect of that, with all the extra attention, all the extra media that you're doing, because like Caitlin Clark is always going to be the player that, everyone wants for the post-game press conference or in all the media sessions, after practice and between games and all those different kind of things. She's always going to be the one, and she has been the one that everyone wants. And that does add up over time. Steel City coach is a diehard Canadian Notre Dame fan since the age of 8. Thanks for your kind comments on the CFL. I didn't know we made any big comments on the CFL, but you're welcome. And Andre, thanks for asking. The back is doing well. I've had a little cramps in my upper back today. Nothing, nearly as bad as the stuff that was going on at the end of the season. But the old back is rounding back into form right now. Thanks for asking. Well, Jess, I think that's going to do it for tonight. We covered a ton from start to finish, starting with Jabron Payne and all the we in and we out. A lot of good stuff. Jesse's going to be playing in a charity golf event tomorrow, so he won't be with us. Vince will be back in. And again, buddy RJ Abatia, USC reporter, is going to join me next week to talk a little USC, so I'm looking forward to that as well. Jess, get your swing on out there tomorrow. Hopefully the weather.
We plan to win.
All right. Sounds good. Hit the like button before you leave. We appreciate it, and it helps us out greatly. So do that and subscribe. Leave us a 5-star rating on Apple. And always appreciate you being here. And we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.